What's going on, everybody? So, before I get to talking, I just want to say I'm working on learning how to edit so I can make uploads that way. But for now, I'm just going to stick to what I know, which is doing it this way, which is just walking around saying what I got to say and saying my mind, right? So, I'm going to talk about a common leftist trick when it comes to these police killings. And what I'm going to do is we're going to compare George Floyd to Dylann Roof. Because one thing that leftists love to do is bring up the Dylann Roof situation to deflect away from situations like George Floyd when it becomes inconvenient for them. So, here's the thing. Yes, Dylann Roof shot up a church full of black people. Yes, George Floyd should still be alive because the cop committed police misconduct. Okay? I agree with that. Okay? But let's look at these situations in the context to see why they're not comparable. Let's start with Dylann Roof. Dylann Roof went into a black church and he opened fire and killed a bunch of people with intent to start a race war. He even said that, right? Now, when he got arrested, he got stopped, he turned himself in, he did not resist, he did not make any threat towards the officer or offer any kind of opposition whatsoever. He did not die because of the fact that he surrendered right away. Now, let's look at George Floyd. George Floyd died during a restraint by the police because police were physically restraining him on the ground after they caught him with a false $20 bill and he actively resisted arrest. He was put on the ground. A cop used a hold and put his knee on the back of his neck, which goes against any police training I've ever heard of. And George Floyd died as a result. He died because a cop was a dickhead. Okay? It wasn't because of his race. The big common difference in this situation compared to Dylann Roof is that George Floyd actively resisted arrest, whereas Dylann Roof did not. Now, I do not care what race you are. Period. Fighting with cops is done in the courtroom, not in the street. If the arrest is bullshit, I can understand, okay? But you don't fight it in the street, you fight it in court. Simple as that. George Floyd actively resisted arrest, which was stupid. And again, it doesn't matter what race you are. Actively resisting arrest is fucking stupid. Period. So, one thing that they like to bring up in this is the Burger King thing with Dylann Roof. Let me explain a little something about jail transfers to you, because I've been involved in jail transfers. I've been involved in things like this. If a person gets arrested in a different county or a different city, and they have to do a transport, so this is where it comes down to, is a transport, because Dylann Roof was subject of a transport. He stated that he had not eaten for several days. When you're in a situation like that, people have rights. Whether they're in there for the most horrible act ever, you still have rights. Dylann Roof has rights as well. In a jail transfer, if a person hasn't eaten, it is not uncommon for that person to get a meal before they go through their transfer, or it is not uncommon for them to get a meal when they are first held. If the person has not eaten yet. That is the law. That is his rights. Okay? Now, yeah, I can agree Burger King is a little lavish for that situation. I can agree. But check this, okay? Check it. In those situations, the most common thing for officers to do is go and get a meal when it is the most easily accessible. So in this case, I guess Burger King was deemed to be the most accessible at the time. They went, they got it, and they brought it back to the jail to bring it to Dylann Roof. He was not brought to the Burger King on the way to the jail. Okay, I have researched on that. He was not brought to Burger King on the way to the jail. He was in the jail, and they brought it to him. And again, he has rights. That's what it comes down to. He has rights. Whether you agree with his rights or not is neither here nor there. He has them. So, when Dylann Roof was arrested, he did not resist arrest. He did not actively resist arrest, nor did he pose a threat to the officers. George Floyd actively resisted arrest. And again, that's what it comes down to. Personal accountability. George Floyd made a stupid decision, and a cop was being a dickhead that went against any training that he had. Okay? That's not racism. That is not racism. That is two entirely different situations with different contexts. You cannot compare those two situations because of the different context of the situation. The left likes to do that, though, because they like to turn this into a thing of that. They like to make it about race, and that's why they deflect to Dylann Roof and say, well, he shot up this place. Yeah, he did. But he did not actively resist arrest. George Floyd did. Now, people call me a race traitor. People have called me a coon, a sellout. The list goes on. We all know what names I've been called. Anybody black who has voiced any kind of opinion different than what is generally accepted for a black person to say has been called those names. Especially if they voice those words to white leftists. Because I've learned that. I've learned it very, very easily, actually. I've dealt with it. I tell them I'm not oppressed. They will shout me down and try to white-splain to me how I am oppressed. Okay, if I get a felony and that disqualifies me from a job, that's not because of my race. That is because I made a decision that got me charged with a felony offense, and a felony offense disqualifies me from the job. That applies regardless of race. Yes, black Americans may commit felonies at disproportionate rates, but again, that is not racism. Instead of calling it racism for somebody not getting a job because of a felony, what we should be looking at is more jobs that will hire felons and more resources for places that will hire felons, right? On top of that, we should be looking at personal accountability, because if people are committing a felony offense at disproportionate rates, if one race is doing it at a disproportionate rate, that's a thing that needs to be looked at as well. You can't just say, oh, well, black people are disproportionately affected by this because, it's racist. No. Let's see. They're disproportionately affected by it because they make choices to commit felony offenses. Personal accountability, again, comes into play, just like it does with George Floyd. And like I said earlier, I'm going to be working on learning to edit and things like that so I can do uploads that way. But in the meantime, I just wanted to make this to sound off because honestly, I got frustrated by seeing the Dylann Roof argument earlier. Peace.